The moment my father slid that professionally printed invoice across the dinner table, I knew my life as I knew it was over. The bold header read, "Monthly rent, family contribution invoice," with my name typed underneath like I was some deadbeat tenant instead of his daughter who had been living in the same bedroom since I was 7 years old. $1,500 a month effective immediately, Dad announced, his voice carrying that cold corporate tone he usually reserved for firing employees at his manufacturing company. This includes room rental, utilities, and what I'm calling a family maintenance fee. Payment is due on the 1st of every month. Late fees will be assessed at $100 per day. I stared at the document in disbelief. But Dad, this is my childhood bedroom. $1,500 is more than what a studio apartment costs downtown. My mother, Susan, set down her water glass with that delicate precision that always preceded her most manipulative speeches. Sweetheart, you have 2 steady jobs. It's time you learned about adult responsibilities. Think of this as real-world financial education. I gestured toward my younger brother, Jake, who hadn't even looked up from his phone throughout this entire conversation. What about Jake? He's 22 and hasn't contributed a single dollar to this household. Dad's jaw tightened. Jake's situation is different. He's still finding his passion, exploring his options in the digital space. Don't be selfish by comparing yourself to your brother. That's when Jake finally looked up from his phone, a smirk playing at his mouth. Speaking of which, can I get $50 for gas? I'm supposed to meet some potential sponsors for my streaming channel tonight. The room went completely silent. I felt something cold and heavy settle in my stomach as I realized this wasn't just about teaching me responsibility. This was about funding Jake's fantasy while I worked myself into the ground. Later that night, I checked my credit card statement, something I'd been putting off. What I found made my blood run cold. There were charges I didn't recognize scattered throughout the past 6 months. $99 to Epic Games Store, $250 to Streamlabs, multiple DoorDash charges. I scrolled through months of statements, my anger building with each fraudulent charge. Jake had been using my credit card information to fund his gaming habit while I worked doubles at the restaurant to keep up with payments. The final straw came when I realized my old iPad was missing from my desk. A quick search on eBay using Jake's username revealed the truth. He'd sold it 3 weeks ago for $300 to buy premium skins for his online games. I marched downstairs where Jake was sprawled across the living room couch, yelling at his computer screen. I yanked his headphones off. "You sold my iPad? The one Grandma and Grandpa gave me for graduation?" He barely glanced away from his game. "Mom said I could use it. You never touched that thing anyway. I needed the money for this tournament entry fee." "Jake, you've been using my credit card for months without permission. That's called fraud." Mom appeared in the doorway. "Taylor, honey, it's just small stuff. Family members help each other out. You're being dramatic about a few little purchases." "A few little purchases? Mom, it's over $2,000 in charges I didn't make." Dad's voice boomed from behind her. "Enough. Jake is going through a transitional period, and we all need to support him." "You're acting like a spoiled child." The argument escalated quickly, ending with Dad slamming his hand on the coffee table and ordering me to my room like I was still a teenager. I lay awake most of that night, examining the pattern that had been developing. How I'd gradually become the family's primary financial contributor while Jake got a free pass on everything. How my achievements were downplayed while his pipe dreams were celebrated. The next morning at work, I must have looked terrible because David Chen, one of the financial analysts, stopped by my teller window with coffee from the good place down the street. "Rough night?" he asked, his dark eyes filled with genuine concern. "You could say that." I feel like I just realized I've been living in a financial nightmare disguised as family loyalty. During lunch, I told David everything. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious as I detailed the escalating financial demands and Jake's unauthorized use of my credit card. "Taylor," he said when I finished, "this isn't about teaching you responsibility. This is financial abuse. Your family is exploiting you, and what your brother is doing is literally identity theft. You need to document everything." That afternoon, David helped me open a high-yield savings account at a different bank, one my family wouldn't have access to. I also created a secure Google Drive folder, naming it Recipe Collection. Inside, I started documenting everything. Photos of the invoice, screenshots of unauthorized charges, a detailed log of every financial demand. That night, I made my first payment of $1,500 to my father, handing him the cash with a neutral expression. He counted it twice before walking away without thanks. The next few months were the most challenging of my life. I picked up every overtime shift available at the bank and worked 5 nights a week at Murphy's Pub. I lost 15 pounds because I was too tired to eat properly and too broke to buy groceries. The financial demands kept escalating. When the electric bill was higher in July, Dad handed me a supplemental invoice for my excessive use of air conditioning. Never mind that Jake's gaming setup ran 24 hours a day. Mom started sending daily text messages with requests that felt more like demands. Can you pick up groceries? Jake needs specific energy drinks for his streaming schedule. Every request was framed as family obligation, but I was always the one expected to pay. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday in October. I'd been fighting off a cold for 3 days but couldn't afford time off. That morning, I finally called in sick to Murphy's. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Missed work today cost the family potential income. Late fee of $100 will be added to next month's invoice. I stared at the message in disbelief. Not only was I paying them $1,500 a month, but now I was being penalized for getting sick. David found me crying in the bank parking lot the next morning. Without saying anything, he climbed into my car and handed me tissues. "This can't continue," he said quietly. "You're going to have a breakdown." That's when he told me about a house he'd seen listed as a foreclosure property. "I ran some numbers based on your income," he said, showing me the listing. "If you keep saving at your current rate, you could have enough for a down payment in about 18 months. The house was a small 1,950s bungalow with a front porch and overgrown yard. Looking at the pictures, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. But how would I explain suddenly moving out? My family would know I'd been planning to leave. David smiled. "What if they didn't know it was you buying the house?" That afternoon, David introduced me to Sarah Kim, a real estate agent who specialized in complex transactions. Sarah outlined a plan that was both brilliant and completely legal. "We'll set up a limited liability company," she explained. "The LLC will purchase the house, not you personally. We'll choose a business name that has no connection to your real name." We settled on Clearwater Holdings LLC. Sarah helped me file the paperwork and set up a business bank account. Every dollar I could spare went into that account, and I watched the balance grow steadily. The hardest part was maintaining the facade at home. Every day, I had to pretend I was just getting by financially, that I had no prospects for independence, that I was resigned to my role as the family's personal ATM. Jake's behavior grew increasingly entitled. He started leaving lists of gaming equipment he needed me to buy. Mom would present these lists with explanations about investments in Jake's future earning potential. The unauthorized use of my credit card continued despite my protests. When I threatened to report it as fraud, Dad accused me of trying to destroy Jake's future over petty jealousy. In December, I overheard a conversation between my parents that confirmed my worst suspicions. I'd come home from Murphy's and was hanging up my coat when I heard them talking in the kitchen. "The money from Taylor is working out better than I expected," Dad was saying. "We've been able to pay down the credit card debt, and there's enough left over to cover Jake's equipment upgrades." "I told you this would work," Mom replied. "She's always been the responsible one. She'll keep paying as long as we frame it right." "What happens when she eventually wants to move out?" "She won't," Mom said confidently. "After paying us every month, she can't possibly be saving money for a deposit. She's trapped, and she doesn't even realize it." I stood frozen, my heart pounding. The casual way they discussed my financial imprisonment made my blood run cold. I took out my phone and started recording, capturing their conversation about using my rent money for a vacation they'd been planning. By February, I had enough saved for the down payment. Sarah had been monitoring the property, and through Clearwater Holdings LLC, I made an offer that was accepted within 48 hours. The closing process was surreal. I signed documents as the authorized representative of Clearwater Holdings LLC, officially becoming a homeowner, while my family remained completely unaware. For the next several weeks, I used lunch breaks and days off to slowly move my belongings to the new house. I started with things my family wouldn't notice immediately. Photo albums, books, clothes I rarely wore. The most challenging part was moving my artwork supplies. I'd been an art major before switching to business, and I'd kept all my paints and canvases stored under my bed. Loading them into my car felt like reclaiming pieces of myself I'd forgotten existed. By the end of March, I was ready to make my move. I chose to make my announcement on a Sunday evening, when the whole family would be gathered for dinner. Instead of words, I simply placed a document on the dining room table, where my father had presented that first invoice 8 months earlier. The header read, "Notice to vacate premises within 24 hours. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad picked up the paper, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and growing anger. "What the hell is this supposed to mean?" he demanded. I took a deep breath, feeling calmer than I had in years. "It means I'm moving out. Oh, and just so you know, all the utilities that are in my name will be disconnected tomorrow morning." Jake looked up from his phone for the first time in months, panic spreading across his face. Wait, what utilities? Internet, cable, and the electric bill, I replied matter-of-factly. Turns out, when you're making someone pay $1,500 a month in rent, you should probably make sure they're not also the ones keeping the lights on. Mom stood up quickly. Taylor, honey, you can't be serious. We're family. We can work this out. Family, I repeated. Is that what we call it when you charge your daughter excessive rent while funding your son's gaming hobby? Is that what family means when you use her credit card without permission? Dad's face was turning red. Where do you think you're going to go? You can't afford to live anywhere else. I smiled, and I could feel how different this smile was from the tired, defeated expressions I'd been wearing for months. Actually, I can. I've been saving money for quite a while now. This is ridiculous, Jake said, finally showing emotion. You can't just leave. What about my streaming setup? I'm sure you'll figure it out, I said. Maybe you could try getting a job. The argument that followed was exactly what I'd expected. Dad accused me of being selfish and ungrateful. Mom alternated between tears and manipulation. Jake whined about how this would ruin his chances of becoming a successful content creator. But for the first time in my life, their words couldn't touch me. I had somewhere to go and the financial independence to support myself. There's one more thing, I said as I headed toward the stairs. You might want to start looking for a new place to live. What's that supposed to mean? Dad demanded. I paused and turned back to face them. It means this house has been in foreclosure proceedings for the past 6 months. The bank is planning to auction it next month. The blood drained from Dad's face. That's impossible. We've been making the mortgage payments. Have you? I asked. Or have you been using my rent money to pay off credit card debt while the mortgage fell behind? How do you know about the foreclosure? Because I work at a bank, Mom. These things aren't secret when you know where to look. I left them sitting in stunned silence and went upstairs to pack the rest of my things. An hour later, I loaded the last box into my car and prepared to drive to my own house for the first time as its official resident. 3 weeks later, I received a certified letter addressed to my parents' house. It was from Clearwater Holdings, LLC, informing the current residents that the property had been purchased by the company and offering them a lease agreement at fair market rent. I'd bought my childhood home. When my family realized they'd have to pay actual market rate rent or find somewhere else to live, the calls started. First pleading, then angry, then desperate. I let them all go to voicemail. Eventually, Jake figured out that Clearwater Holdings, LLC was connected to me. He sent me a series of text messages that ranged from angry accusations to pathetic apologies. The final message simply said, I got a job at the Amazon warehouse. I just wanted you to know. I read that message while sitting on the front porch of my house, coffee in my hands and morning sun warming my face. For the first time in years, I felt truly peaceful. 6 months later, David and I were dating officially, and I'd converted one of the bedrooms into an art studio. I was painting again for the first time since college, discovering that my creativity hadn't died but had simply been waiting for the right moment to emerge. My family eventually found a smaller rental house across town. Dad got a second job, and Mom started working part-time. Jake kept his warehouse job and was apparently doing well enough to afford his own small apartment. We still saw each other occasionally at family events, but the dynamic had shifted permanently. I was no longer their financial safety net, and they could no longer treat me like a personal ATM. The most surprising development came 8 months after I'd moved out. I received a text from Jake that simply said, "Thank you." When I called him to ask what he meant, his voice sounded different. Older, more genuine. I hated you for a while, he admitted. But working at the warehouse made me realize how hard you must have been working just to keep us all afloat. I never appreciated what you were doing. I wasn't trying to teach you a lesson, I told him. I was just trying to save myself. I know, he said. But I learned one anyway. Today, I'm sitting in my art studio, putting the finishing touches on a painting that will be featured in a local gallery next month. The morning light streams through windows that belong to me, in a house that I own, surrounded by art supplies that I bought with money I earned and saved. I still work at the bank, though I've been promoted twice since gaining my independence. David and I are talking about moving in together. I'm considering going back to school part-time for my master's degree in art therapy. The most important thing I learned wasn't about money or real estate or even family dynamics. It was about recognizing my own worth and refusing to accept treatment that diminished it. I learned that love without respect isn't really love at all, and that family members who truly care about you don't exploit your kindness. Sometimes people ask me if I regret buying my parents' house, if I think my response was too extreme. The answer is always no. I didn't buy that house to hurt them or to get revenge. I bought it because it was a good investment, and because I could. More importantly, I bought it to prove to myself that I was capable of more than just surviving. I was capable of thriving. The girl who used to hand over $1,500 every month while working herself into exhaustion is gone. In her place is a woman who knows her worth and isn't afraid to demand that others recognize it too. A woman who owns her own home and creates art and builds relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation. That invoice my father gave me was supposed to teach me about adult responsibility. Instead, it taught me something far more valuable, that I was already an adult, and adults don't have to accept treatment that makes them feel small, trapped, or worthless. I kept that original invoice, framed it, and hung it in my home office as a reminder of how far I've come. Sometimes when I'm having a difficult day, I look at it and remember the girl who was so shocked by that piece of paper. Then I look around at the life I've built for myself, and I smile. The family invoice was supposed to be my burden. Instead, it became my liberation.